magic and illusions, they grab our attention because there's a certain way that the world works, and we know it. We know there are causes that go together with effects, and when the effect doesn't go with the cause, we stop and we go, whoa, what happened there? Or we go, hey, that was really cool. How'd you do that? How did you make it turn out the way that you did? And we know that there's a trick involved because that's not the way the world works. So the reason I'm telling you about this is because today I want to look at a passage of Scripture, Hebrews chapter 3, verse 1 and following. And it tells us that we should fix our thoughts on Jesus. And when I read that originally, I had a little pushback. I was like, I can't really control all my thoughts. There are things that pops into my head, and I don't have control over those. And I started thinking, and emotion is the same way. You know, if I'm mad about something, I'm angry, and you go, well, don't feel angry. It's not like I can just flip a switch and feel better about the situation. So how is it that we're supposed to be able to fix our thoughts on Jesus and not let them vary or move away from him? Well, I read a psychologist, though, and the psychologist says, often we wrongly think we can't control our thoughts. However, we can choose where we set our minds. Science shows us that we only think about one thing at a time. Why not be purposeful in choosing where you place your thoughts? And I thought, that's pretty interesting. That if we say, I'm a negative person, I don't want to be so negative, I'd like to be more positive. And then we start saying, Lord, help me to do that. And daily, each time a negative thought pops into our head, we say, you know what, I just want to stop right now, God, and I want to say, thank you. Thank you for my home and my kids and my wife and all the ways that you've blessed me. That over time we create a situation where we do become more positive people. Emotion is the same way. If you're angry about something, it might tell you there's something in that situation that is wrong and I need to do something to change it. When we make that change, then it resolves the issue for us. Our emotion actually does get better. So we can't control every single thing that pops into our mind, but we do have a lot of control over our own thoughts. And so let's look at this passage of Scripture for today and think about how we can fix our thoughts on Jesus. This is Hebrews chapter 3, beginning in verse 1. Therefore, holy brothers, who share in the heavenly calling, fix your thoughts on Jesus, the apostle and high priest whom we confess. This idea that we would fix our thoughts on Jesus, it doesn't mean that we would just think about him occasionally or just one time say, oh, picture Jesus in your head. What it means is to study something, to give your full focus and attention to it so that you learn something from it. It's the same word that Jesus is using, or same phrase that Jesus uses in Matthew chapter 6 when he says, consider the lilies of the field and the birds of the air. They don't sow, they don't reap, they don't make clothes for themselves, and yet they're clothed and fed and taken care of by God. It's an important lesson that if we really study, we learn something from. So we should really study, we should really focus our lives on Jesus. And then there is this issue that there were some Jewish people who had become Christians, and maybe life had gotten difficult for them. They faced persecution, hardship, and they decided it might be better to just go back to being Jews instead of following after Christ, because this is hard, this is difficult. And so the writer of Hebrews is writing to tell them, fix your mind on Christ. Let your thoughts be about him so that you're not distracted by these things, these persecutions and hardships and difficulties that have come your way. Verse 2 goes on. It says, he was faithful to the one who appointed him, just as Moses was faithful in God's house. Jesus has been found worthy of greater honor than Moses, just as the builder of a house has greater honor than the house itself. In the previous chapter, we talked about the supremacy of Christ, how he was greater than angels. And so the writer of Hebrews is sort of taking it one step further and saying he's even greater than Moses. Now, for the Jewish believers, they would have said Moses is the prophet's prophet. He's the number one guy. I mean, not only is he above the angels, but he's above all other prophets because God spoke to him face to face like he would a friend. The scripture tells us that. And so they had elevated Moses to a high status. And this writer is saying, and Jesus is even higher than he. And he says, consider somebody that builds a house. Maybe you know somebody who built a house, and you go over and you look around and you think, man, this place is amazing. You did a great job building this house. Well, if something happens to the house, that builder has enough skill, he could build another one. But if something happens to that builder, the house is not going to build another builder. And so really the point here is Jesus is high above. He is equivalent with God. God is the creator. He has made everything. And Moses, it said, is part of the house that God is building, the same way that God's building in you and in me and in our lives. So verse 4 goes on, it says, for every house is built by someone, but God is the builder of everything. Moses was a faithful servant in all God's house, testifying to what would be said in the future. But Christ is faithful as a son over God's house. And we are his house if we hold on to our courage and the hope of which we boast. So fixing our thoughts on Jesus is really about us being committed to him, being connected to him, and saying, I'm going to follow you no matter what hardship or persecution comes my way. And I really feel like that raises a couple of questions that we should consider for ourselves. One is, how are you holding on to your courage? I don't have to tell you this. You already know it. But life is painful. There are hardships and there are difficulties everywhere. Maybe you're facing some of those right now. It doesn't matter where you turn. It doesn't matter where you look. It doesn't matter how good something is. There's still going to be hardship and pain in it. And as an illustration, let's just think about this a minute. How about a wedding? How about a marriage? You know, that is one of the best things. Our society, we elevate romantic love above everything. And so let's say a husband and a wife, they find each other and they're just blissfully happy, right? And so they decide to get married and we're all invited to the celebration with them. Well, they're going to make vows to each other. And what is it that they typically promise each other along the way? They usually say something like, we are going to be together for better or for worse, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, promising to stay together till, did you say it? Till death do us part. I mean, they're saying we are in this until somebody dies, like to the very end. But they are acknowledging not only their love for each other and the fact that they're committed to each other, but they're acknowledging that life has got pain in it. Things could get better, but they might get worse. You might always be healthy, but you might get sick. You might be rich, but you might not. You might lose everything and be poor. And eventually, death will enter into that relationship somehow. You will be separated for a time. One preacher, a guy named Vodi Bakum, he points out no matter how in love you are, no matter how good it can be, in the best of circumstances, you will be separated by death, and there will be pain. There will be pain. Why is that important? Well, because we believe lies sometimes, and lies can be very destructive for us. So take, for example, we here in the United States and the way that we look at love. You know, we love love. It's like a romantic love song. There's nothing better than that, you know. And if you buy into the fact that a relationship with somebody is always going to be mountaintops and it's never going to be valleys, it's always going to be rainbows and butterflies and adrenaline, and then you get married and you start having problems. You start having pain. You might say, well, something has really gone wrong here. That's not what it's supposed to look like. And so now you're filled with disillusionment. You're filled with resentment. You think, I must have made a huge mistake. I must have chosen the wrong one. And if that's the case, then what's the solution? You choose again. Do you see why this is a destructive lie? Because you're going to have pain. It's going to happen. Maybe you find yourself right now, and you thought, man, this person that I'm with, I thought this was the lovingest love that has ever loved in the history of love. It is so lovely. This is great stuff. And now you're faced with the reality that maybe there's going to be hardship. Maybe there's going to be difficulty. Well, no matter what the situation, in a marriage, let's say you're dealing with that, there's going to be passion and there's going to be pain. But Bauckham points out there is also the providence of God there. That if you say, Lord, I trust you. I trust the things that you say, and I trust you so much. I'm willing to show a little courage, a little bravery. I'm willing to face this pain and work through it and get to the other side. Your relationship could be even deeper than it was before. But you get following Jesus is not just simple. It takes something, a little nerve, a little pluck, a little daring, a little audacity, a little mettle, a little grit, a little backbone to stand up and say, God, I'm yours, and I'm going to do it your way. And if you can follow him with that kind of courage and that kind of trust, he'll see you through to the other side. Now, kind of as a side note, I need to add to that. God didn't create us to be alone. He means for us to be together in community. And a lot of times we want God to just miraculously heal us, to just instantaneously do something. And he does that sometimes. But a lot of the time, it's like in the scripture when he talks to Paul and he says, my grace is sufficient for you. What he's telling him is, I'm not going to take away that thorn in your flesh. Or like Jacob, if you want the blessing, you might have to walk the rest of your life with a limp. Or like Moses, if you want to win this victory, you need some people who are going to hold you up. And so I don't know where you are, but maybe you find yourself in a place where you need other people. That's why God gave us the church. And I don't mean the building, I mean the folks. I mean, there are people who will gather around you who will help hold you up, regardless of what it is that you're dealing with. At any rate, where's your courage? How are you holding on to your faith in courage? A second thing I want to ask you about is, how are you holding on to hope? I recently read this article, and it was a guy by the name of Mitchell Dillon. And he talks about how he took his family on vacation. This was after Christmas, and his kids were younger, and they're in South Florida somewhere, and there's this cheap little gift shop, and they're in there looking around, and his son finds this thing that his son just believes is awesome. It is a seashell chicken. And the son is like, I have to own that. And so he gets together his Christmas money and a little bit of spending money that his dad's given him, and he puts it all together in a big wad, and it's not quite enough. So he goes to the owner of the shop, and he negotiates with the owner for a lower price for this seashell chicken, and he gives the guy every dime he's got. And the guy says, okay, it's enough, I'll give you the chicken. So then the kid comes over to his dad, and he's like, Dad, I bought you a seashell chicken. And the dad is like, he didn't tell his son this, but he's thinking in his mind, that's got to be the most worthless gift I've ever gotten in my entire life. I mean, what are you going to do with the seashell chicken? Do you put it on display on your kitchen table, set it on the mantle, put it in the entryway of your house? I mean, you're not going to do that, not with something that you consider tacky. So over time, though, this guy starts thinking, the dad starts thinking, my son gave everything he had to possess this chicken. And then he didn't keep it for himself. In a moment of just selflessness, the kid gave up everything so that his dad could have something the kid considered a treasure. And the reason I'm telling you this is because that's really what Christ has done for us, isn't it? That God believed our greatest problem is sin. And so he came and gave everything on a cross. He died for us. And he did it for the joy of having a relationship with you. I hope that that brings a lot of hope into your life. Listen to this. This is John chapter 1, verses 12 and 13. Yet to all who did receive him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. Children born not of natural descent, nor of human decision or a husband's will, but born of God. Jesus gave up everything so that you could be a child of God, adopted into his family. I want you to understand just the hope, the joy that that brings. That if God is for you, nobody can stand against you. You are his. You're his child. You're in his family once you come to him and trust him. I hope that's something that you've done in your life. May God bless you with courage and with a great sense of hope. This is the first week of the month, and so we're going to have communion. If you'd like to participate, then I ask you at the end of this video, take a look at the next one.